pretty good. Got as far as I can reach with the bucket on these two. You know, the Douglas fir is a fairly common tree that's planted around here. It's native to our area, but not native down in the lowlands. And they grow entirely different down here than they do up in the Santa Cruz Mountains and where they belong. Oftentimes they get too big and too wide, and they have a much faster rate of growth, much like the redwoods do. So they're also susceptible to a number of diseases, including the fir beetle, and there's a trunk canker that's starting to take them out. That redwood up there is starting to decline. The one to the right of it is a Douglas fir. There's a redwood behind and a redwood here. And oh, look at this. A lot of people look at this and say that's a dead tree. How many of you know what kind of a tree that one is? That's a dawn redwood, Metasequoia glyptostroboides. Kind of an uncommon tree. But some people cut them down because they think they're dead. It's a deciduous conifer. Slow down. Let it run. Good. Beautiful. Good job. Good job. You know, this next trick that I'm going to show you here is actually quite important. I'm working from the bucket, but the same technique will work if you're on spurs. I want you to note, well, first off, take a note of that hook that I put on the edge of my bucket, which makes it a whole lot easier to work with a big saw. This has got a fairly long bar. It's a 32-inch bar, so it is a bit of a challenge to pull this out. And before I started, the last piece of wood that was up there, I cut this wedge. And certainly you can use a plastic wedge, but I didn't take one up with me. So it's nice to know that you can always cut a wooden wedge and it works out just fine. I want you to note that what I'm doing, I'm going to show you this over and over again. The first time I pulled it out and I forgot to set the brake. It's always important to set the brake before you pull it out. And note that I cut right up to the edge, but I didn't cut all the way through. So the wedge kept it from pinching my saw, and by leaving just a quarter of an inch, it allows you to get the saw out quite easily. Now in the bucket truck, it's quite a bit easier to extract the saw because you're further away from the wood. If you're on spurs and you've got a long bar, it can be a real pain in the ass. It's really hard to get that bar all the way out there. But like I say, I'm going to show you this over and over again. I go right up, just almost to the very end and stop. Hit the brake, pull it out. I set it on my hook, but if you're on spurs, you can let the chainsaw hang. Take that off, and it comes off nice and easy. I put one spot at the bottom, which was a drop spot, and I put wood chips down there. We dug a bit of a hole and wood chips because we didn't want things to go flying all over the place and wreck the landscape or hit the house. I was very careful to look out for any surface roots as well. So this went pretty fast, actually. It was a pretty quick removal, but every single time I'm doing it the same way. Now, you may have your own tricks, and that's not the way I always do it. Sometimes I'll use a couple of dowels in there if the pieces are even heavier. But these pieces, I could move them quite easily. But it's a real pain if you pinch the bar. So every time I just pull it out, get up, it comes right off, and I'm very careful to hit the same spot every time. Didn't want to mess up the landscape there. And I'm pretty good about dropping the pieces of wood and having them hit, right on the end of the log. If you flip it over and it gets any momentum on it, then it can really take off. I like these pieces of wood to hit solid and hit firm on the ground as they go. And not everyone went that way, but I was pretty consistent with this. Once again, wedge it when you get about halfway to 2/3 of the way through. You stop, you hit the brake on the saw. This one I kind of screwed up a little bit on. I went too far, so I went ahead and pulled it out, and I pulled it back. Fortunately, if that was a real heavy piece of wood, that would have been really difficult. But I cut just a little bit too far, and it pinched the bar. I got away with it on this piece, but like I said, if I was dealing with 36-inch rounds, those things are a pain to move. Good sharp saw. This is my 500i. That's the electronic version. I truly love this saw. By the way, I'm using the GoPro, so everything looks a little bit distorted. The wood looks smaller than it actually is, and it looks like I'm a lot higher than I actually am. Most often I use a lens on a camera that's more consistent with what the reality of it is, but I wanted to show the whole imagery here, so I'm using a wide-angle lens on the GoPro. Same shot every single time. We pieced this whole thing down in chunks of firewood because of a couple of reasons. We had to load up all this wood, and it's much easier to move them out of the way if they're not too heavy. If I would have cut doubles or triples, they would have hit the ground and I would have had to stop, and I'd have been waiting for them to figure out how to get a dolly in there and move the stuff out of the way. So I'm just consistently cutting firewood rounds. And the second reason is I put a sign up on the road, free firewood, and if everything's cut to firewood length, sometimes people will come and take it. In our area, there's burn bans, so it's hard to get rid of firewood. Sometimes I have to even pay to get rid of it. I think I'm probably gonna, if it doesn't go tomorrow, then I'm probably gonna end up maybe renting a wood splitter and splitting it all up and then chipping all the wood just to get rid of it. This is not a great quality firewood. There's a lot of pitch in it, and most people don't like pine or fir, so it's often something I get stuck with. It's like, I know this is a little bit redundant, but I think this is important to see. Stop just shy of the edge. If you leave it too far out, then you can't break that piece of wood out. And as soon as you pull the chainsaw out of there, if you've left it, say, 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch, and you get to this point, it's not going to break off. You've got to reinsert that chainsaw back in the gout. And if you've pulled the wedge out of the way, that's almost impossible to do. So really pay attention to how you stop. All right, enough of that. Let's get on with something else. There's the top of the wood. I got it to a point where I got it all the way down as far as I could go, and I was able to fell the last part of the trunk. We were on a fairly busy street here as well. There we go. We had 2 trees to remove. Okay, back up. Both of these trees are Douglas firs, and they're both in trouble. They were both dying. There was a lot of dieback up there, so he had way too many trees in his yard, and he wanted to get rid of the ones that are in bad shape first. That's the spot that I was dropping all the wood. There was sprinklers in there, there was landscaping, there was plants, and there was the building. I came down a little bit further than that before I dropped the trunk. Oh, this was a real pain in the ass. We had a piece of wood. We were chipping some of the wood, and one piece got jammed in there. And we worked on it for over a half an hour, maybe 45 minutes with bars, and we could not get it. So finally, with my electric chainsaw, this would have been a real nuisance if I had to use the gasoline chainsaw. The fumes and the noise would have been terrible. An electric saw in here, it wasn't too bad. It was just kind of sketchy not hitting the metal inside the chipper here. But this thing was solid. So what I'm doing here is I'm cutting a little wedge in there at the point where it's jammed in so tight so I can relieve some of the pressure on it. And thankfully it worked. Every once in a while our chippers get jammed up because something goes in funny, or
What is that bar?
I'm sure you've had problems like this before.
Okay. Good. Oh, there it goes. It's moving.
Yeah.
It took some of the pressure off of it.
Put a zoom out.
There we
Ah,
go.
voila.
Yes. Ah. Oh, get that fish out. Got it. Look how close I had to cut it.
Okay.
Okay.
Candid camera, Jorge, but smile. YouTube, 5 million views. Get 60 phone calls a day saying, I want to meet Jorge on the YouTube channel.
He's so cute.